Today, I am interviewing a special lady who is close to my heart. For those that follow my YouTube channel often, you would know that she is a regular guest to my hot seat. She is an educational consultant and runs a business called Little Road Royal, producing handmade attires for girls for all special occasions. She is also a panelist on a program called Women's AM via Islam channel. She should be a life coach as her words of wisdom offer inspirational guidance. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the one and only Saleena Aj.
Hello. Hello.
Assalamu alaikum, Saleena. How are you?
Alaikum salam. I'm fine. I need to be writing these intros because they're far too flattering, and I kind of want to hide underneath my hijab a little bit. Yeah, they're far too flattering. You big me up far too much. I told you off on Facebook for that the other day. But come on, I'm ready for you.
How have you been after your heart surgery?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I'm good. They told me not to work for 6 months, and I said no. Basically, and I went ice skating for the first time as well, which probably get in trouble for, but that's all right. I'm used to being in trouble, so yeah, I'm good. It's all good.
I have been watching you on Islam channel and writing notes constantly on your statements and quotations. The truth is, your words of wisdom have had a big impact on my life, and it has helped me to analyze my own behaviors in challenging situations. So, are you ready for some grueling questions again?
I'm ready. Go for it.
On an episode of Women's AM, I was screaming with joy when Shanina Cannon and Aisha Davies commented on one of your phrases from our interview. You produced a brilliant line which goes, "I want my children to be thrown to the wolves and come back leading the pack."
Yes.
To start off, could you unpack this inspiring metaphor and give us advice on how we can have a resilient mindset when facing certain life challenges?
The more and more I study pedagogy, and the more and more I really want to go back to university and do a degree on psychology, because the human mind is really it fascinates me. I would like to do that in the distant future, maybe not at the moment, but definitely in the future. When I as a teacher, the children that make it aren't necessarily the children that are the smartest or the most intelligent. They're the children with the most grit and the most resilience. And I found, when I've observed people in general in workspace, my own staff, the ones that really stick out are the ones with grit and the ones with resilience. So I think because life is becoming quite challenging and the future is set to get even more challenging, in order to manage this huge onslaught of mental illness that seems to be on the rise, I think if we develop resilience and grit, it will help us face those challenges. That's not to say we're always going to be gracious, or I'm always going to be gracious under pressure, but if you develop your resilience, I think you'll be on your way to surviving the coming challenges. So when it comes to my own children, they've had quite a few challenges, especially my son, where he's very much a learned gentleman. He's not really, he likes to read, he doesn't play football, he's got other interests, like he'll talk to me for an hour on engineering blocks and things like that, and he's only 10. But the problem is that other children don't necessarily get him, and so he's had issues with, loneliness and isolation because he's got other interests. Now, I've given him lots of training on how to listen to other people's conversations as opposed to always trying to be the leader of the conversation. But it has led to him having quite a few lonely moments in school. Now, I could have gone to the school and fixed the problem for him, but I didn't do that. I went to the school once and I told the teacher once that he's this way inclined. And then every day after school, I've said to him, Issa, what have you done to get... If you're feeling lonely, then you need to solve that problem. If you're not feeling lonely, then fine. But if you're having any moments of unhappiness, what have you done to solve this problem? Instead of doing the mummy thing and going to solve the problem for him. So what I mean by throwing my children to the wolves, and I'm not gonna I heard my cousin say something similar to that once, so I kind of snatched it from her. So I'm gonna just be honest. What I mean by that is, I don't think as a parent you should solve all your children's problems, because as much as it's painful to watch them make mistakes and then get hurt as a result of it, you're not going to do them any favours as adults if you don't help them build that kind of resourcefulness and resilience on their way to becoming an adult. So that's what I meant by that.
Brilliant answer. Your wisdom is so inspiring. So first of all, I would like to ask you some questions about climate change, a subject which is close to your heart. Sir David Attenborough addressed a climate change conference in Poland, stating that, right now, we are facing a man-made disaster on a global scale. It's our greatest threat in thousands of years. So, from your perspective, what's the importance of acknowledging global warming in the 21st century?
My answer is going to be something that's completely, you're not going to expect it. But this global warming is real, very, very real. But the causes of global warming, to my knowledge, based on my research, is probably one of the greatest cons ever inflicted on the human race. Because I had the pleasure of watching a documentary by a gentleman who was the heir to the Procter & Gamble empire. And Procter & Gamble do Pantene, all kinds of pharmaceuticals. They have L'Oreal, you know, all of these massive corporations are under the Procter & Gamble wing. And so it's a huge corporation, it's massive. In fact, I don't even think the people who work for them know how big they are. It's huge. So the heir to the Procter & Gamble empire decided to reject his throne, and he couldn't understand why there are some who have so much and there are some that have so few. So his initial investigation was to find out why we have a massive issue with energy and why some people have it and other people don't, and so his investigation had nothing to do with where he actually ended up. And he went on a long journey at looking at Tesla, looking at a long line of scientists who basically discovered free energy, and how every single one of them were either defaced or defamed or thrown into disrepute in some sort of way. Some scientists who discovered free energy were actually wiped off the face of the planet. We never heard from them again. Tesla was reputed to have had 80 cases filled with his life's work when he died in the New York hotel at the age of 88. They were all taken by the FBI, and only 30 of them were recovered. So what happened to the 50 cases? So I forget his name now, but the heir to the Procter & Gamble empire, he's absolutely certain. Funnily enough, it was the Morgans who threw Tesla into disrepute, because Tesla had come up with a contraption that basically you can plug onto your home and that would just give you free energy. And Morgan was the biggest dealer and provider and supplier of copper at the time. The Morgans are a huge banking family now. And if Tesla's research had gone global, well, that would have thrown his business pretty much out the window, because there would have been no need for the huge amounts of copper needed to transport electricity from one place to another. So this big thing between Morgan and Tesla happened, and Tesla then again fell into disrepute. His works were, his lab was burnt down, and he is one of many scientists who delved into the realm of free energy and had their works either confiscated, burnt down, or they just disappeared off the face of the planet. And so climate change is because, I believe, after doing lots of reading, and I really do urge people to go and read, I believe climate change is being orchestrated by huge corporations because there is free energy available. It's just they don't want the greater public to have access to it.
Thank you for sharing, explaining your values on the environment. In terms of responsibility, however, you have previously mentioned that corporate companies have had a massive impact on climate change. Could you explain how organizations affect climate change? And please also discuss what the Thrive movement is, which you explained to the Islam Channel viewers.
So the Thrive movement is a movement where they give you free tips on how to encourage, how to lobby the local government, lobby your local MPs. They give you free advice on how to produce free energy yourself. They have a list of scientists that need support. It's a movement that also they did a huge amount of research into the torus, which is a mathematical concept. But actually, when the scientists involved did further research, excuse me, I've got a cold. They found that the torus, which is basically, it makes it, when you look at the torus, it does this. It's the natural flow of energy in the universe. It's around the sun, it's around the earth, and they use that to make these devices that give off free energy. They literally look like little generators that you plug into your home, but they are sufficient enough to run a whole home. So that's what the Thrive movement was. The Thrive movement was the heir of Procter & Gamble who said, you know, there's enough for everybody. Why is it only the few? And he even, in this documentary, he even explains the banking system as we know it. It's a fantastic documentary. I would urge people to don't just accept the norm. Don't go to your work 9 to 5 and think, you know, there is more to life than this, and our lives are very much, I know I'm going to sound like a bit of a conspiracy theorist, but you know, there's no smoke without fire, and if the heir of a huge empire has turned around and said something is not right with the system, then something is not right with the system. And he discovered that when you follow the money, you've got the general working public, which is us, then you've got the government, and then above them you've got the monetocracy, where you've got the huge corporations who are feeding their ethos and agenda to the government, and then via, you know, various corporations they're achieving their political agenda. So this is a very real concept, and it's been called different things along the way. It's been called the New World Order, blah blah blah. So I just think we need to, as a people, we need to question the norm, because we are the many and they are the few. So if we want to lobby for and I'm not encouraging violence or anything like that, but if you put pressure on your local MP, if we start promoting these scientists who've come up with these concepts, can you imagine what free energy would do for the third world? If everyone was able, for about $500, just to plug one of these things into their home and be able to cook and clean for their family, run their farms, and not have to be in debt to the local government for renting the land and paying excessive amounts of electricity and irrigation bills. Can you imagine? It would revolutionise Africa alone. But you just get the feeling that they don't want that to, whoever they are, that they don't want that to happen. So it's time that we wake up, I think, and stop just accepting reality as it is.
Yet another thought-provoking answer. On a recent episode of Women's AM, you stated that you have a passion for the ocean out of personal interest. Could you please tell us how your passion for the ocean developed, and why are people taking too long to act against global warming?
I think it's to do with ignorance. It's to do with ignorance, but it's not ignorance on purpose. I always say there's ignorance on purpose and there's ignorance without purpose. And ignorance without purpose is because people are busy, they're trying to pay bills, they're going to work, they're trying to manage their families. You know, children grow up, and then even my life, it's clubs and then 11 plus and then GCSEs, and people get busy. So I think they don't have the time, but the thing is they don't realise that this is you're building your kids' short-term future. What's going to happen? So are you telling me there won't be any more humpback whales, you know, by the time that my children are 30 years old? That makes my heart hurt just to even think about it. We do not have a right as a species to wipe out a whole other species just because we can communicate and we're slightly intelligent. We don't have that right. We share this planet together. And what made me, so I'm going to keep referring to documentaries now, but what made me become, and it's not just me, it's my husband, it's my children. Our journey started when I was 7 years old, and I always believe, my husband will always say follow the breadcrumbs. When I was 7 years old, my mum and dad took me to see a bullfighting thing. I can't remember what it's called, a bullfighting show. And I was 7 years old, and I had no idea where they were taking me. And to be fair, they had no idea that we were in Spain, and they thought, right, this is what you do when you're in Spain. You go to a bullfight. When I saw the first spear go into the bull, I wasn't a child that threw a tantrum, but oh my God, my dad said I was inconsolable. I was screaming at the top of my lungs, and I think everyone was paying more attention to me than the bullfighting. And so they had to take me out. But in those days, because I'm very old, they didn't have a car parking system, so everyone just kind of chucked their cars wherever. So my mum and dad had to stay in the car with me in 35-degree heat until the bullfighting was over, and then everyone else started to disperse. But that was a deciding moment in my life. I actually remember that, and I remember thinking, I never want to see an animal harmed. I never want to go to a zoo. I just don't want to do anything in relation to animals in captivity. So that was my personal belief, and that alhamdulillah, I met a husband who has the same ethos. And then my son had the opportunity to go with his school to the London Zoo, to a London Zoo trip, and he actually bunked the day off, and he had a plaque, and he stood up on Facebook and he said, I'm not going to school today because I refuse to go to London Zoo. And he did his own research, and he made the decision all on his own. But from that, I came across, and I can't wait to get this man on Islam Channel, because I think I'll be a bit starstruck. But there's this man called Rico Barry. Now, Jav, you're a bit on the young side, but they used to bear this show called Flipper. I don't know if you will remember Flipper, but Flipper was a show about a dolphin who was friends with a little boy. I think it was a little boy. And anyway, so before this show, no one really knew about bottlenose dolphins. After the show, all of a sudden, these aquariums started popping up because people wanted to go and see Flipper. And so Rico Barry, who was the trainer of Flipper, he was there when Flipper died, when the real dolphin died. And that, for him, made him realise that what he'd been doing and selling this idea of a friendly dolphin was wrong, because he to this day believes that Flipper committed suicide, because Flipper came up out of the water, because dolphins are intelligent animals. He took one last breath and he sunk, and he refused to come back up, and he basically suffocated. And that's when Rick realised that years and years of filming with this dolphin had taken its toll, and he was desperately unhappy. And also he was then responsible for all of these, he felt that he was responsible for all of these people wanting to be near Flipper the dolphin. So on his journey to raising awareness about aquariums, and that we shouldn't go to them because the animals are mistreated and they're kept in captivity and they're not happy, he discovered that a lot of these aquariums were getting their animals from a place called Taiji in Japan. And he created this documentary called The Cove, and you can buy it's really cheap, you can buy it's like $9.99 off Amazon and eBay. And this documentary, what they do is between March and September, these boats go out on the migration route of these dolphins, and they put huge poles in the water and they bang to create a wall of sound, and they herd thousands of dolphins into this tiny cove. That's why it's called the cove. And the thing is with the cove, because it's so tucked in, you can't actually see what goes on. So Rick found this out. He built this whole documentary around this, the capture of these animals. And what happens is all of the aquariums from all over the world, including SeaWorld, will go and they will buy the pretty dolphins. And would you believe the rest are slaughtered and sold as whale meat in Japan?
Oh.
And the documentary goes into mercury poisoning and how the Japanese public are being fed a lie, and it's a brilliant documentary, highly recommend to watch. But that basically led me on a journey of what is going on in our oceans. Look, I'm not an activist, I don't have a huge following, I could probably be doing a lot more. But what I'm trying to do is, with Islam Channel and my work with my company, is build myself as a public figure, so that I can start shining a light on all these issues that actually aren't being uncovered. So that's how I came to have a real love of the ocean, because there are some real issues other than plastics that are being completely ignored.
It is quite interesting to hear you talk about your passion for the ocean. When researched on the NASA.gov website, I myself recently discovered that one of the biggest ocean's procedures is to absorb energy and distribute it more evenly around the world.
Correct.
How do you reckon we could better protect our oceans?
Oh my gosh, I struggle. We do the whole recycling thing in my house as well. And I'm going to give you a very odd answer. I'm not advocating any one diet, but I do think if you had, like, for example, me and my family, we've decided to be like weekday vegans. So from Monday to Thursday, we don't have meat or dairy as much as we can. My children have a bit of butter in the morning, but that's because I haven't found a worthy replacement yet, so they still get a bit grumpy with it. They like normal butter on their bagels in the morning. But so what we try to do, because when if you go see, I watch a lot of documentaries. There's another documentary called What the Health and Cowspiracy, and both of them talk about, a lot of the governments are pushing for us to have 4-minute showers and recycle like mad, and cycle to work and all of this, and that's all good. You need to carry on doing that, or at least striving. But if you went vegan, one beef burger takes 565 gallons of water to produce. Just one burger. So can you imagine if you gave up meat for the week and just had it at the weekend? You would save, the consumption of meat would go down, so the demand for meat would go down by default. The need to irrigate land to feed the cows would go down. The water they drink would go down. So if everyone just lessened the amount of meat that they eat, it's good for your health, it's good for the environment, then I think the world's resources would balance out a bit more. So I would say, I would advocate a vegan, like a vegan diet. If you're like me, I can't give up meat altogether. It's part of my faith to eat meat as well, because we have the sacrificial Eid every year where we sacrifice the meat. But from a Muslim perspective, the Prophet that we follow actually ate very little meat in his lifetime. He lived a predominantly vegan diet, with the exception of milk. So for me, I'm just kind of following what the Prophet does, because it's beneficial for my body, it's beneficial for my family, and it's beneficial for the environment. So having a predominantly vegan diet actually saves water and saves resources, because the huge amount of resources that are being used nowadays all go towards agriculture.
Thank you for that answer. Saleena, I am sure the viewers would agree that your passion for the natural world is more genuine than our current Secretary of State for Environment, Michael Gove. For those that watch Islam channel, you'd know Saleena's opinions on that MP, ha ha ha.
Did you just use the G word? You just used the G word.
Change, however, it has been demonstrated that trees can tell us a lot about our environment. Trees are sensitive to local climate conditions like temperature and rain, and effectively provide data on climate conditions from 100 to 1,000 years ago. Saleena, from your professional experiences as an educational consultant, how could we effectively educate young students about the importance of climate change?
So, I mean, before I was a teacher, I was a forensic anthropologist. So, and you're right, trees are like bones. If you want to, you can actually look at the occupational markers of a person's bones and tell what they did for a living by their bone structure. So the same can be said for trees. Because trees, as they age, they grow an outer layer, which then creates the rings, and which then can be used, can be dissected, and you can get chemicals from them and all kinds, and basically a bit like carbon dating, basically. I absolutely agree that every tree we cut down, it's like we're taking a razor to our history and the history of the earth. So I mean, we're not. The problem is, as an educational consultant, you can't push your view onto others. That's the problem. Well, it's not a problem. It should be that way, because I believe people should educate themselves, and therefore, by default, develop their own views on life and the world. So, as with my son, I didn't tell him not to go to the zoo. He asked me why I don't go to zoos. I gave him my point of view, but then I told him to go and speak to my cousin who does go to zoos, so he could get a balanced argument. So what I would say to my students is, don't accept the norm. Don't accept popular culture. Question everything you're being fed. So if you're being fed to go to the zoo, why don't you go and ask yourself, do I really want to go to the zoo? Let me go and check what zoos are about. If you're watching a TV program like there's Sky at the moment, they're pushing Ocean Rescue, the Ocean Rescue campaign. Okay, what is it they're advocating? They're advocating plastics, a worthy cause. What is the actual issue with plastics? And then if you go into research, you'll find that, the government are always pushing the recycling of plastics, but they did this experiment the other day where they put a GPS dot on a plastic bottle, and then they tracked it, and the bottle ended up in China and back into the system. So, and back into a massive place where they were they were landfilling plastic. So that actual plastic bottle didn't get recycled. So unless we know that and we actually raise awareness about it, they're just going to get away with doing what they're doing the opposite of what they're promising, breaking promises basically. So if you question, I will teach my students and the schools that I consult in, teach your students to critically analyse everything. So if you're being told, oh, we've got a trip to, I don't know, the park, do some research on the park. Are there issues with the park? Is there anything we can help with while we're there? If, like, for example, milk is one of the biggest cons on the planet. I mean, the dairy industry push for milk, but it's a known fact now that the countries that consume the most milk are also the countries with the highest level of osteoporosis. So the milk, consuming of milk and the absorption of calcium is a massive con. So I would just say it's plain and simple. Whenever you're in any situation, question it. Question. And formulate, do your own research. We've got Google now, which is amazing. We've got YouTube now, which is amazing. And if there's an issue coming up with the internet and censorship, make sure they don't censor our internet, so that we've got free access to lots of journalists who are doing amazing work all over the world. Today I was on the Islam channel and we were discussing the 1940 experiment that was conducted on Guatemalans, and the US government via Rockefeller authorized for the Rockefeller Institution to purposely infect hundreds of Guatemalans with the syphilis disease, sexually transmitted disease, so they could test the potency of penicillin. I would never have come across that hadn't it been for this amazing website called The Mind Unleashed, where it has so many journalists going out there and holding people to account. So question, question, and question again.
Thank you for that amazing advice. Let's now focus on another crucial issue which has a big impact on our world, mental health.
Oh God.
The website Psychology Today is one of my favorite sources for discovering content on depression and anxiety. Rita Labune, a doctor in psychology, states in a blog on the website that not everyone experiences depression in the same way. Some might not even realize that they are depressed, especially if they seem like they are managing their day-to-day life. He stated, "So Saleena, why do you think people, especially the older generations, find it challenging to discuss mental health to begin with?"
I think it's a popular culture stigma. I think now, I mean, Prince Harry and Prince William have done a lot of work on raising issues with mental illness, but it's becoming acceptable to talk about your issues. And I'm not really into celebrity life anymore. I was when I was quite younger, but it does help when celebrities are coming out and discussing their mental health issues. I mean, one of the for my generation, because I'm older than you, Jav, so for my generation, you know, we had shockers like Robin Williams, who just all of a sudden committed suicide. He was probably one of the funniest people I've probably had the pleasure of ever watching growing up, and yet deep down inside he was so desperately unhappy to the point where he ended his life. Drugs, alcohol, they're all rife because it's escapism, because people are trying to escape. But you're right, depression comes in all different shapes and forms, and one of them is to conform, just to get on with life, when actually it's a very deep question, Jav, and what I would say to people is you only get one life. And I know that's carted around a lot, but this is it. Like, I can't get yesterday back. I can't get the day before back. I spent 8 years in the school desperately unhappy because I felt like I never saw my children or my family. I felt like I was in a prison, and also some of the staff were incredibly domineering and very, very authoritarian in their approach to management, which made me desperately unhappy. And I just, conformed, just got on with it. So, recognise that you've only got one life, you're not going to get it back. So if you're unhappy, and it seems like this huge mountain, take baby steps and maybe talk to one person or write one thing down, but try and break that chain of darkness, because it feels a bit like you're in a well and the walls are really slimy and you're trying to claw out of it, but then you keep, so you might have a little bit of progress, but then you slip down. So yeah, you need to seek help, but I know that's difficult because it depends on what psychological blocks there are as well. I just finished watching, I've got a thing about documentaries, because when I'm working I have documentaries on in the background, because I'm a big believer in my mind is like a muscle, so I need to feed it good things. And I just finished watching Surviving R. Kelly, which was a very, very disturbing documentary on the sexual abuse allegations. And all of the women that have come forward and have they say they've either overcome or overcoming the trauma of their story. And they all have one thing in common: they all asked for help. Yeah. So you can't do that. You can't do it alone, and you shouldn't be doing it alone. So ask for help. And if you need to go to a stranger to ask for help, then that's what you should do. But there's so many psychological blocks. It's very hard to just say to a human being, you know, get over it and go and ask for help. And what I would also say is to the families and the friends that are around them, take note of behaviour and of, but don't jump on the person. Sometimes you can just be there and listen. You know, you've got to assess if you need to go and get advice on how to deal with someone suffering from depression, then go and seek that advice. But please don't just tell them to get over it. Just find a way of building a rapport and then somehow working out a way to give them help without being too imposing.
Great answer. Discussing mental health can be quite a sensitive topic. For example, recently there was an unfortunate event which made headlines. Molly Russell, 14 years of age, committed suicide in 2017. Previously, she was exposed to self-harm images on social media. Her father said Instagram played a significant role in her passing. Instagram responded with this statement: "It does not allow content that promotes or glorifies self-harm or suicide, and will remove content of this kind." I am sure almost everybody will agree that such content should not be on social media in the first place. As far as I'm aware, you are a proponent of the Islamic approach to fiction, which you expressed recently on the Islam channel. You mentioned that children should distinguish between right and wrong, and real from fake. So Saleena, in Molly's situation, are we placing too much emphasis on social media, or should we shift the focus on discovering causes of mental health issues among young individuals?
I'm a bit old-fashioned when it comes to social media. My children I can't speak for other people's children. I can only speak for my children. My children get screen time once or twice a week because I want them to have the experience of it. I don't want to not deny them that. And they do need to, like I said, throw them to the walls and hopefully they'll come back leading the pack. I've given them the skills. As a parent, I've also put blocks in place. They're not allowed on any device in privacy. End of story. So if you want to go on your iPad, fine, but you'll do it in the kitchen where I am. You want to go on the computer, fine. We have one centralised computer that the whole family will use because I need to see what you're doing. When my son comes of age, because he's the older one, he will get a smartphone, but the smartphone will be handed to me every night. He will not be having it alone in his bedroom at night. So some people might think that's heavy-handed, but you know what? My children are okay with it. Because I've sat them down and I've spoken to them about children like Molly. Unfortunately, I have experiences of children within my own family who are suffering from mental health issues because of this insatiable thirst to be popular. If you're not popular, then the other children look down on you, and then there's this whole self-esteem thing. Oh my goodness. So what I sat my children down and I said, look, I don't care what the rest of the world is doing, because in this home there's the four of us and we have to work together as a family to be successful. So if I'm doing something wrong, if I'm on my phone too much, because I run my business and I have to post on social media a lot, my children will say, Mum, it's dinner time. Mum, you're not looking at me when I'm talking to you. And so I will put the phone down. But likewise, they understand that I am the mum. My husband is the dad. So if you want to use a computer, by all means, but you'll do it in the family room where we're together, or in the kitchen where we're together. If you want to go on games and apps, fine, I'll check. You pass them by me first and I'll approve them, and then you can have a go. And if I say no, I won't just say no and I don't need to explain to you I don't agree with that. I will always offer my children an explanation, because I want them to understand my mindset. Because if they understand my mindset and the protection that I'm coming from a place of protection, 9 times out of 10 they will get it and they're fine with it and they don't argue with me. So when it comes to social media, we can't have one set of rules for the internet and say, yes, we don't want it censored, because then amazing journalists that we want to to have the ability to read about could also be censored. At the same time, these really nasty websites where they glorify, you know, gore and self-harming, and it doesn't matter what they say. I've been on a lot of these websites that it is the glorification of self-harming. There's websites that teach you how to be anorexic. There are websites that teach you how to be bulimic. And, you know, I've seen them. They're on the dark net. I've seen them. I've been party to... I've had to... Because in order to protect my students from them, I've had to look at them. So they are available. So what that institution is saying is a load of rubbish. They are available. Now, if they're going to try and go around shutting them down, great. But if you've brought up a well-rounded individual who has the skills to recognise when something is dangerous, then you won't need to worry about them so much. But all too often, children have phones in their bedroom. You know, I know 7-year-olds who watch Big Brother late at night because they've got a TV in their bedroom. It's highly inappropriate because it's really sexualised. You know, and I'm really sorry, but if you're an adult in charge of a minor and you are allowing that child to watch things like Predator, all these films I love, you know, I know parents who allow their children to watch Predator and all these things. It's, in my view, it's a form of child abuse because you're granting permission to expose a minor to something they are not mentally mature enough to be party to or witness to. They're not mature enough. So you are building neurological pathways that could cause some real issues with their psychology. So, you know, it's being a parent and being a carer is hard work. You need to question everything you do, everything you say. You have to second guess everything. And yes, it's hard, but hey, you know, you've chosen to take responsibility for this life, so you can't take any part of that life for granted, especially developing the psychology of a child. So that's my answer to that, yeah.
Thank you for that insightful answer on such a delicate subject. I would like to discuss ways we could manage our mental health in relation to society. Todd Farklin, a clinical psychologist, stated in one of his blogs on Psychology Today that offering support shows a level of understanding rather than telling someone with anxiety to calm down. Saleena, you previously mentioned that we must be mindful of what we say to people that are struggling in one way or another. So Saleena, how can we raise awareness of differing mental health conditions, and how can we, as a society, improve our approach to those that are suffering?
Kindness.
Yeah.
It's that simple. You don't know what wars people are fighting. So always be kind. And I said to you before we started this interview, I had a sour experience with someone who I was a bit grumpy with afterwards. And actually that person in the last 2 weeks came to my aid. So sometimes your best friend can end up being your worst enemy, and your worst enemy can end up being your best friend. So you need to, I'm not saying turn the other cheek and just let people walk all over you. Life is hard, and well, it's not hard, but life is a journey, and so there are bits and bobs you need to kind of look out for, I suppose. So I think if you always remain civil, you can always be at peace with yourself, that, you know what, I'm not going to rise to that person's negativity. So if someone's hurt your feelings, or someone's been rude, or someone's not doing something that you've paid them to do, or you don't know what demons that person is fighting, and if it's affecting their ability to work or provide you with a service. Or you just have to, it's hard because, you know, I suppose everyone's human, so to have a knee-jerk reaction, you know, some people are really, like my husband's amazing, he never ever has a knee-jerk reaction. Like sometimes I have to poke him to make sure he's still alive because he just never has a knee-jerk reaction, whereas I'm like, this has happened. But having him around has really calmed me down, and it's really made me take a second look. So from now on, I've promised myself, when someone hurts my feelings or does something that I don't particularly like, I'm going to choose the civil route or choose to walk away. Tell them, I hear what you're saying. This is what I wanted. It's not gone that way. But before I react, I need some time. So I'm just going to step away. I'm also a big believer in you are the average of the people you socialise with. So if you're socialising with people who are driven, full of positivity, you know, they have a goal and a dream, you'll also be part and parcel to that same mindset. So the best way you can help people who are struggling is to not rise to their negativity if they're giving you any, because like I said, you don't know what's going behind closed doors. B, you could just ask them, are you okay? What you just did was not really right. So if you're not okay, just know that you could talk to me or find someone to talk to. C, you could maybe give them some time. You'd be surprised how much someone would appreciate you saying, do you want a cup of coffee or a cup of tea? Should we grab a 5-minute, you know, Mars bar break or Kit Kat break or whatever it is? I would say always try to be the person that extends the hand in friendship, regardless of how you're being treated, if you can stomach it. Not everyone can stomach that. Because I tell you what, I'm part of a really amazing business networking group. We meet every Wednesday between 5 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. And the hand of friendship that has been extended to me in my time of need has been overwhelming. Overwhelming. And it's because people decided to look past my smile and take the time to get to know me and what was going on. And I really appreciate that. And so I think when it comes to helping other people, you can't force help on someone. All you can do is extend that olive branch and hope they take it. And if they don't, find different ways to extend the branch. So it could be, like I said, a cup of tea, could be a kind word, could be silence, it could be distance, it could just be a card in the post. I love it when my customers send me a card as opposed to an email, because they've taken the time to go to the shop and buy a card and write and then send that. That for me, because people are so busy, that for me is the sweetest thing you could do. So find a way of extending the olive branch, whether it's distance, a kind word, a cup of tea, or, you know, maybe a card or something. Google it. if you're not sure how to extend an olive branch, Google, I don't know, how many ways to show someone that you care. And you'll be surprised, you'll find something that's effective and something that will work for somebody.
We really appreciate your answer on this. I am sure we both agree that it is important to have regular conversations about mental health. It is something that we would be always talking a lot about in our future interviews to come, inshallah. Let's discuss to what extent wealth and occupation has an effect on our mindset. We know that Brexit and politics in general produces mixed feelings in society. According to research by UK Council of Psychotherapy, rates of moderate to severe depression and anxiety have increased by 30.5% since recordings started in 2015. Saleena, with regards to uncertainties over Brexit, what words of advice can you give to people that are feeling particularly stressed over the current political system?
What do I feel about Brexit? I feel sick of Brexit. That's for sure. If I hear Brexit one more time, I think I may leave the planet. If there's like Richard Branson's building that ship, right, to go to Mars or something, I might jump on that. Look, you can, and I did a post on this the other day, and I think you saw it. You can only control what you can control. So when it comes to Brexit, I do believe, look, I'm a Muslim, so I'm just going to talk from an Islamic perspective. So I do believe that in all this chaos there is a plan. And if Brexit is happening, and a lot of people might find it strange that I'm talking about God and Brexit in the same breath, but I do believe there's a greater plan. And, you know, Brexit is part of his plan. So I can't control Brexit. And no matter how much I talk about it, I can't control Brexit. So I just think what I'm going to do is I'm going to run my business. I'm going to assess every day what I need to do. I'm going to work as hard as I can, look after my family, enjoy life, and that's all I can control. The politicians and the Brexit and the exit and the whatever it is, I can't control it. That's just in God's hands. So I'm actually done. Do you know what? I haven't listened to the news in about 2 weeks. I haven't, and that's not because I want to remain ignorant, because Shahina will tell me, Saleena, you're remaining ignorant. It's not that. It's, first of all, it's the same thing being said in different ways. It's like, and also, I just think it will work its way. It will work its. I mean, my dad was part of the generation where they had like a 15% interest rate on their mortgage, and if they can survive that, then I think we can pretty much survive anything. I just think, I think it's the people, it's the British people that make the country what it is. Couldn't give a monkeys about the government, if I'm absolutely honest. I think there's some really lovely politicians, and I've had the pleasure of meeting some really lovely politicians. I've also had the pleasure, I suppose, because of meeting some really dim politicians where I'm like sitting there thinking, oh my God. So, you know, it takes all sorts. I don't have a strong opinion about Brexit. I just think que sera, sera, what will be, will be. And I will try to worry about what I can control as opposed to what I can't control. I'm letting myself off the hook a bit.
Calming words of advice, Saleena. Thank you. I am sure many people would benefit from your guidance. Moving on now, I'm not quite sure if you would agree, but it seems that immigration is one of the biggest issues in the world, and it is something we should scrutinize in more detail when we do future interviews.
Oh no.
On that note, what message would you give to the government when it comes to immigration and valuing people's contribution to the workforce?
Do you know what? I wish I'd listened to a Carla more before I came here. I think, again, like the issues I mentioned before with the dairy and the sources of energy, I think there's a massive... The history of Europe and the history of the human race has been this massive miseducation, and I think it's been done on purpose. I mean, Britain has always been a mongrel state. Our monarchy is part Turkish, Greek and something else. The Vikings came and completely flattened England as we know it, and the Romans, and then, you know, the monarchy as we know it descended from the Vikings, and oh my gosh, and then the Spaniards came, and we've always been a mongrel state. I get the mentality that we need to look after our own. I get that mentality, but I can see how you know, one country can't solve the world's problems. I absolutely understand that we can't just open the gates and allow everyone to come in because there are not enough resources. Well, maybe there are enough resources to go around. Maybe I'm disagreeing with myself here. I think there are enough resources to go around because the 1% hog like 80% of the wealth. So, but you see, this is the thing, isn't it? There's enough for everyone. There is enough for everyone, but because I don't think the rich are only in the West. I think there's a lot of rich in the East as well. I think the Arabs have a huge part to play in the whole. I mean, I watched this documentary, and I won't mention the person, of this Arab, and he built 2 massive compounds for his children that they don't use. They weren't mansions, they were compounds with a staff and a grounds, and they were like holiday homes, and they cost him billions to build. and his children don't use them. I don't quite understand how you can sleep at night knowing there are people in your community who are starving, but you're happy to build 2 massive compounds that are not being used. I just don't get that mentality. Maybe I'm an idealist, I don't know. But I just think there's a small amount of people with a huge amount of money, and they are hogging the money for whatever reason. And yeah, so I actually, so when it comes to migration, I know that I've gone off on a tangent. I actually think that if you want to solve the problem of migration, spread the wealth and then no one will feel the need to leave. It's that simple, isn't it? If all of these Africans that are trapped in the jungle in Calais, if they all in their country had their own little home, a little job, had a car to drop their children to school, if everyone had that little piece of heaven, why would they migrate?
Thank you for that amazing response. I would like to turn our attention to discussing ignorance and jealousy. We know that Donald Trump has caused outrage all over the world with his unconventional approach to politics. As a result, many people despise him. The White House was partially closed for 35 days, which caused the economy to lose $11 billion. I am sure that you agree with me that his behavior is extraordinary for a president. Do you think Trump's attitude could be stemmed from unpleasant childhood experiences?
I think he's unpleasant on a number of levels. I think he's drained the world's resources of orange makeup. That's for sure. Sorry, that was rude. But I don't. Do you know what? I don't quite know what to think of. I can't. Whenever I see him on the news, my husband says that my mouth is always open like this because he says stuff, and you're like, really? What do I think of Donald Trump? Do I think he's had deep psychological issues from it's hard to tell. I mean, he is a very special person. He must have. No one can. I mean, that's what I was saying. They've actually discovered now that a child's birthing experience can actually now be linked to their psychological development later on in life. So maybe his mother, it was a traumatic birth. Maybe he felt that he's definitely got a thirst for power, hasn't he? So maybe somewhere along his childhood experiences, he was denied power and constantly belittled. Maybe he was isolated. That's why he loves the tension. He loves the limelight. He's definitely got a lack. He's definitely had a lack of something. Because for me, whenever I hear him speak, it's always a power struggle. I don't think he's silly. I think he's a very intelligent man, but I think he has very dangerous ideologies. And when you have intelligence can go either way. So when you have intelligence coupled with dangerous ideologies, because ideologies have very little to do with intelligence. Because I mean, you look at the doctors that were running the hospitals during the Nazi regime in Germany. They were incredibly intelligent, and they were the ones who pioneered the gas chambers. So that was a huge amount of intelligence, but it was married to a very dangerous ideology. So I think that's where Donald Trump is. He's a very intelligent man who has in his mind very dangerous ideologies. So do I think I must admit I haven't read up on him too much, so I don't know about his life too much. I studied the Kennedys a lot, and they've had some serious trauma as well. But yeah, I don't think you can just end up being that way. Yeah, I do think you have to take a journey to get there. And maybe he's had issues in the past with the black community, because he clearly, I mean, but in saying that, he's got a huge following from the black community. So yeah, it's a difficult one, Javon. For once, I'm a bit speechless. It's unusual for me.
Thank you for such an interesting answer. I try not to discuss Donald Trump in my interviews as there is so much controversy surrounding him. On the topic of arrogance, however, I read an interesting article by Frederick Newman on Psychology Today called Spoiling a Child or Not Spoiling a Child. He stated that the spoiled child is likely to be irritable and unsympathetic to others. So from your perspective, can you define the meaning of being spoiled, and do you think that breeds arrogance?
I'm not going to let my parents watch this interview because they will hands down say that I'm a spoiled child because I'm an only child, and I am really spoiled. Like when I'm at my mum and dad's house, if there's water on the table over there, I literally go, "Can I have the water, please?" And I'll expect them to go and get it for me, and I'm nearly 40 years old. No, I must admit I disagree with that. You can spoil a child, but you don't necessarily need to produce a brat. My children are very spoiled, but hugely empathetic. So, I think you can spoil a child, but still give them a sense of value. So, for example, in my house we have the tick charts, and we have categorised tick charts. So we have a tick chart for prayer, a tick chart for helping around the house, and a tick chart for general behaviour, and a tick chart for homework and academic achievements. And so when they get to the top, they get spoilt. Like they get whatever they want, like if it's a trip to something in the West End or a show or something. So they get spoilt, but they're not just given those things, they have to earn it. So I don't know if I'd have to read the article myself. If I think what you mean by spoilt is if you just indulge the child without them having to actually make an effort to receive those indulgences. So yes, then yes, for sure. But also, I think I hear a lot of parents, you know, it's nurture versus nature, isn't it? I hear a lot of parents being very aggressive to their children, and then as their children grow up, they return that aggression. And then the parents are like, "Oh my God, do you see how he speaks to me?" And I'm like, yeah, but he's not just learnt, he's learnt that. That's a learnt behaviour. It's a bit like, I'm sounding a bit like Super Nanny now. But these psychological research projects are very useful, but I do think that it's back to basics, isn't it? Bring your children up with love, teach them respect, demand respect and give respect, and have conversations with your little ones, and make sure you don't do the whole, like, I'm an adult so I don't have to explain. Yes, you do, because if you expect them to exhibit the same behaviours when they're older, they can't do that unless they've understood why you've made a decision or how you've arrived at that decision. So make them part. They say it takes a village to raise a child, and it's so true. You need to tackle the child development from every facet. So yeah, you can, yeah, spoil. Yeah, I do. I agree and I disagree with it.
You sure bless us with some great answers to some grueling questions. Ha ha ha. Okay, our interview is almost coming to an end. Let's finish with some motivating words. In one of the Women AM episodes you mentioned your love for the Surah Al-Shura. The verse goes, "O Muhammad, and removed from your burden, which weighed down your back, and raised high your fame. So verily, with the hardship, there is relief verily, with the hardship. From my understanding, Allah gives us intense hardships, and we would eventually be rewarded in this life or the hereafter. As you are aware, I have been fighting disability professionals for my rights over this decade. I am now living life happier and healthier than ever before. On another episode of Women's AM, you mentioned, people remember a sour experience than a sweet one often. Considering this, can you give us one tool that Allah gives us to combat challenging daily situations?"
So, I don't believe in coincidences. I believe every single experience is there to teach me a lesson. And I'm reading a book at the moment called The Power by Rhonda Byrne. And she calls people in our lives personal emotional trainers. So each person they're put into your life for a reason, to develop a side of you that hasn't yet developed, or to help you in your journey to achieving your goal, because your law of vibration is such that you're attracting positive people into your life, because like attracts like. So what I would say is, you can't be angry or sad if you see every circumstance and every person as a lesson which you can't be taught unless you go through it. And there's a famous pastor called John Gray, I think his name is. He and I like listening to his they're his sermons, but actually he very rarely mentions his own personal God. He talks about personal journey, and he said you're being prepared on purpose. He says you're being prepared on purpose, which I'm a deep believer in. He also says that if God sees you to it, he'll see you through it. Oh. So he doesn't burden you more than you can bear. And like, for example, you're stronger than me, because I don't know if I would be able to bear the burden of your disability. I think I would crumble mentally, whereas you seem very strong. So each person has their cross to bear. Each person has a strength that's personal to them. So if you see every bump in the road as a lesson, then you can't be sad, really, because there'll be something that happened that you'll think, oh, like I had alhamdulillah, I haven't had too many, I haven't had any really angry customers. All of our customers have been very happy. I've had one angry customer, but the value of the job was not that much, and it went a bit wrong, and well, it didn't go wrong on my part, but he felt it went wrong, and so, and I was patient and I saw it through. But because it went wrong, I changed all of my terms and conditions in relation to my company because of that sour experience. And if I could, and it was a very sour experience, and if I could go back in time to change it, I wouldn't. Even though I was desperately anxious during that time. I wasn't anxious because, you know, I was afraid of what I was, because I believe everything is by God's will, but I was anxious to see what God's decision would have been at the end of that, circumstance. So that's what I was anxious to see, if it would have gone my way or his way. Thank God it did go my way, but I had to change all my terms and conditions to reflect that experience. And can you imagine if there was like a huge value of an order that went wrong? Had I not had that experience and then changed my terms and conditions as a result. Oh. So every bump in the road is a notch on your educational belt. Oh. Because life's a journey, right? You're always learning. So that's what I'd like to end with, is like, see every negative aspect of your life as an opportunity.
Oh wow. Thank you for that amazing answer. I completely agree that we must have faith in Allah and use His amazing gifts in order to be rewarded by Him. We have now come to the end of this interview. As we know, you are very inspired by Tony Robbins. My last question is based around the quotation mentioned in a YouTube film. He said, "Be loving to people. Give them so much love that they have to give you love back. If you really want love, start pouring it out so deeply and powerfully to so many people, it will come back tenfold." I know that you would agree with him.
Yes.
So Saleena, can you please give us some final words of motivation on how love and empathy to change this world for the sake of Allah?
It's not easy, but if it was easy, everyone would do it. It's really, I would say, start small. Find one person that you really don't like and pray for them. You don't even have to tell them. Just take someone who's really offended you, really hurt your feelings, and pray for them. And then you'll find that your heart will soften. And then pray for them the week after. Choose someone else that you don't like. Choose someone else who's annoyed you that day, like someone has stolen your seat on the train or something like that, and pray for them. Start off like that, and you'll start to train your mind to give love more easily. So that's what I do. And and that, you know, I had a very great lesson. I mentioned, didn't I, with that person who did a job for me that I was really had my feelings hurt with. So my target is to pray for the very person who I don't like. And also, if you can go that step further, extend that olive branch to that person you don't like. And then when it comes to your own loved ones, find the thing that they wouldn't expect and try to do that. And try to be, and this is something this is a reminder for me, try to be a person of your word. So even if you're late, so for example, I know you send me lots of messages, but you know that I'll eventually get back to you. So that person who texted you last month that you haven't got round to texting, try to always have like a list of people that you need to get back to, because your little piece of time, your little piece of attention that you're giving them sends a message that they're worthy. And I'm just going to end on this. If you're feeling outcast, if you feel strange, and if you feel like you're not part of society, you feel different, go and watch The Greatest Showman and listen to the song This Is Me, and you will find words of guidance in that song, because it really does encourage you to see how you should love those that are actually the ones who are not receiving love at all. Find the ones that receive the least love and give it to them.
We have now come to the end of the interview. Thank you very much for your time and lovely answers as always, Saleena. By the will of Allah, you will be back in my hot seat around 6 months' time. Before we go, I would like to pick your brain once again. Please suggest a topic that we haven't discussed yet for our next interview.
Topic that we could discuss for our next interview. I'd like to talk about love a bit more. I think that would be interesting. I would also like to talk about how to network with other people, and how to deal with people who purposely go out of their way to make you feel uncomfortable or unwanted.
Okay, fascinating. Well, I better get researching from now. May Allah bless you, Saleena J.
Thank you very much. I always have a great time when I come here. Your question. I'm gonna go home and sleep because I feel like I'm like all wisdomed out.